There we go. It says that we are live. So, hi, if you're watching the replay, ignore me while I light the candle, which I should have already
I
done. But if you're here for the replay, you should see me. So, thank you so much. It's fine. Thank you so much for being here. And I know at least one person. I know Steph is going to watch the replay because she lives in Australia, so it's the middle of the night for her, which is the only reason she is not a co-host, honestly, because she is asleep. But anyways, hi Steph. But if you are seeing us live now, which I think you should be, hi, thank you so much for being here. So excited to talk about my favorite book in the entire series. This is the one that I've been most looking forward to. It's not that the rest of the series is not like equally good. It's just this is my favorite. It always has been. It probably always will be. Partially because of the relationship stuff. But yeah, I just love this one. So Jess has quit on us with my blessing, so you can expect for her not to be here again. Again, on perfectly good terms. She was just bored, and that is fine. This was not really what she had expected it to be. And again, like that is fine. Expectations are needed. But we have Bethany for the first time, who has loved the series, and I completely forgot about that, and that's why I didn't ask her in the first place. So that's my bad.
It's okay.
If you guys could tell people if it's the first time that you read the book, how much you like the book, and I mean, you can introduce your channel if you want. They probably, all 5 of them probably already know who you are, but nonetheless.
Hi, I'm Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. This was my first time rereading The King of Attolia, and I love this series. I liked this book better on a reread than I did the first time. I think the first time I gave it like 4 stars, and I upped it to 5 stars the second time around. I think it was because I was like, what is this perspective change to this person? I don't know. But like now having like rereading it, I was like, oh yes, no, this is excellent. So
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly. Robin.
I'm Robin from Paperbacks and Planners. This is my first time reading the series, and I gave the first one 3.5 stars, the second one 3 stars, and I gave this one 5 stars. I loved this book so much. I totally get why it was your favorite, Heather. I love this one. Loved it.
I know on my first read, I was also very thrown by the perspective shift, which I had prepped Robin for, but I had
so I think it didn't bother me at all because I knew going in that it was something different.
Right. No, I thought we were going to be reading from Eugenides, and I was like, no. And also, I think, because I did read these first 4 books back as a teenager, that's how many were out, or early teenager. And I don't think I'd ever read a fantasy series where it switched perspectives like that. I don't think it ever happened to me. So I was very thrown the first time. And of course, by the end of the book, I was like, great, immaculate. I'm on board with everything. But definitely at the beginning, I was like, I literally don't care about you. I don't want to hear from you. I'm not happy to be here with you. Go away. Like, what?
Yes.
We're here together.
I do think this is the only fantasy I've ever read that does change perspectives like this series does in general, where it kind of like hops around in third person. I've never read anything like that. And it was definitely jarring at first. Like, because it isn't the first book like
it's all
from Jen.
And
then like in the second one, all of a sudden it starts hopping around and I was like, wait a minute.
It does make sense to me though too, because I think she's really trying to make it a YA series. And so like the book that we'll get there eventually, but like the more recent book, you have a young character when Jen is like well into his adulthood. And so you're from the perspective of, so it is interesting. Like, I do think it allows her to sort of like, keep telling the story from the perspective of somebody younger.
Right.
I think it also helps with her reveals because you're getting these like little peeks into different things. And then when the reveal happens, you have all the information that you need. Whereas I think it would be really hard to do from one point of view.
Yeah.
I also think that the way that she writes it does allow you to also see a little bit of the inner workings of the different courts
Yeah.
without actually following different characters from every single court, or like multiple perspectives where, you know, one chapter is in Attolia, one is in Sunis. It's not like that, but it does still allow you to see what is happening in different ways. That, again, just wouldn't really be possible, I don't think. You'd have a lot of the character finding out the information, like a
Yeah.
lot, if you were
I think
only
it
following
worked
one person.
so well in this one too, because there was all these like little reveals throughout where because you were
Mhm.
in like Costas's head and
Mhm.
he would like be thinking things and you'd get like 4 paragraphs from someone else and you're like,
Right.
I see
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really hard to do, like you said, otherwise it would be a lot of them sitting around talking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like that would be boring.
I also think with this one in particular, it'd be very difficult to have it from Eugenides' perspective and not kind of hate everyone around him because
Yeah.
they are treating him so poorly.
Yeah.
Um, that it would be really hard to suddenly switch up at the end, like, oh, we like half of these people.
Yeah, you're like, what?
I don't think it would have really worked.
I think
Yeah.
that's true. Because it is interesting to get like the outside perspective of how people see him and then see
Mhm.
that slowly change with time
Yeah.
is satisfying, I think.
I cannot believe you're here at 6 AM. That's wild.
Yeah.
That's
I
dedication.
went back to bed at 6 a.m. because I was up from 1:30 until 6 a.m.
Boo. Yeah, it is interesting. I feel like I do think that this is one of those series that no matter how many times you have reread it, you forget things and then you're like noticing the connection for the first time of little things that again like and actually I think it was Marissa um was commenting on my deep dive video this morning and mentioned that Megan Whalen Turner says that you can read any of these books as standalones. You can read them in any order. And it is true. And I told her my sister read her first book in the series was The King of Attolia. Then she went back and read The Thief, or she went back and read The Queen of Attolia. Then she went back and read The Thief. So like she was completely out of order and loved it, which is wild, you know. If you've read it in order, it's kind of wild, but it is doable and it does work. And that's just like hard to even understand with
Yeah.
the layers of connection that she has throughout every single book.
These books are brilliant. So I would say,
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of the best YA fantasy out
Yeah,
there,
For
honestly.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was blown away by, like, some of the stuff that she, like, pulled off, and like you said, like, her ability to make it readable without having some of the other stuff. I don't know,
Yeah.
I was very
Yeah.
impressed.
And
Yeah,
you don't get a lot of this, like,
no.
Mm-mm.
political fantasy like
Mhm.
this. It's so good.
And
Right.
I didn't think I liked political fantasy because I had only read, like, really dense adult
Yeah.
political.
Mhm.
So, like, reading this, I was like, "Wait, this is a ton of fun."
I think the other thing with political fantasy, a lot of times that I don't like, because this was probably my introduction to it, right? So I spent the rest of my life trying to find books like the Queen's Thief series. But a lot of political fantasy is not our main character that is really the mastermind. You have a lot of
Mhm.
politics played against them to where like you're worried about their safety. They're having a lot of like big, huge, life-ending problems, and that's not fun for me, like, I am stressed out if that's what we're doing, and that's a lot of times what you have with political fantasy because that is realistic. It's
Yeah.
unlikely that you have so much power that you're safe all the time.
Yeah.
And that's not even true in this series. It's not that nothing bad ever happens to these characters. It's just even in this book, you saw a lot of unfortunate things happening to the King of Attolia, but you also see that he wasn't necessarily suffering in vain or for no reason. The things that he was allowing to happen to him, he was using kind of as the rope to hang people with. And he was like, you know, you don't know it, but I could stop you at any point, and I'm allowing you to continue and to keep going because it ultimately serves my purpose.
Yeah. I loved the little callback to the gods at the end of the
Mhm.
second book being like, um, it had to happen this way. You wanted this. And he's
Right.
like calling back to that. He was like, apparently I did it to myself. I was
Right.
like, I left that.
When he says, I'm not a great king with one hand, but the gods know I'd be no king at all with two.
So good.
Yes.
I feel like the only other political fantasy I've liked this much was the David Bob trilogy.
Oh yeah, those are really good. But those, and I think that's the thing is that that is another series that has like a lightness of touch to it where like bad stuff happens, but it doesn't feel so heavy most of the time. Like I'm fine reading heavy political fantasy also.
Right.
I think, but yeah, Heather, have you tried those?
No, the first one is just kind of sitting on my TBR theoretically.
They're also like this.
You might like them. I wonder.
Right. I think I might like them too.
They also have a hint of romance in them that was just enough to like keep me engaged when like the plot would slow down.
Yeah. So. I do like at least a smidge of romance.
Yeah, it's in there.
I do prefer that.
It is. Yeah.
So Robin has not read the rest of the series yet, so we obviously will be murky on any spoilers for the rest of the series. But I always end this book like really just loving Costas so much and being like, I love this little guy. What a great guy. I'm excited for you to be here now. I also really love, maybe we could spend, hold on. I'm not reading that and talking at the same time. So let me stop pretending that I am. Hold on a second. I absolutely love the romance in this book, even though our couple is already established and we're not watching them fall in love. I do really just love seeing a couple treat each other as they should, and showing their love and affection for each other, showing respect to each other. And in this one they don't even have like no relationship issues at all, because they have a couple blowout fights and the queen is not necessarily happy with the way that Jen is handling everything. But at the same time, like the whole reason why I've loved this relationship the entire time is that she was in a prison of power, basically, right? And with no real options, no real allies. She has servants who she values and loves, but she doesn't have a partner, right? And she doesn't even have any family or any peers like that she can truly trust and just find comfort in. And so with Eugenides being her enemy in a lot of ways, but at the same time, seeing her as a person the entire time, and not just as the wicked, cruel Queen of Attolia, that's my favorite part. And then in this book, just watching both of them, but like she loves him and she wants to protect him from her court, and he just absolutely refuses to let her destroy herself in order to, put him in power. He's like, either I'll get there on my own or I won't. Like, you are not going to punish your most loyal servants because they are working with the information that they have, even if normally that would be the correct course. And I love that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with this. You really see like the difference between sort of like what their relationship is privately and what people publicly assume it is, and how they kind of play into that in a lot of situations. And I think that's really interesting because that's probably true in a lot of political relationships, right? That like there are different assumptions people make and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But then Costas like starts to see bits of like, oh, they actually like love each other, even if nobody else is like willing to accept that, which is interesting.
I thought it was like the whole time that I was reading, I thought it was really, really smart of her, the way that she kind of like used Costas to mimic the reader's opinion of Attolia throughout like the first two books, because like you really don't like her at first and you're like, there's no way that they love each other, there's no way that they actually like each other, they're using each other. And then like as he like figured out, like as the reader has slowly figured it out, I thought it was really genius. I was like, this woman is a mastermind. And, like,
Agreed.
I think this one too was also partly my favorite because she did a really good job of putting just enough little reveals throughout that as Costas was realizing things, that it never really slowed down because you were
Right.
always, like, starting to piece things together, um, and I
Yeah.
thought that was really, really well done
Right.
too.
Yeah.
The
And
first
all of their cute little moments. Every time, like, one of them cupped each other's cheek, I was just like, "Dead."
also
When she
with
kissed his eyes, it was like, "I love your eyes, and I love your
yeah,
ears," and I was just like, "That's it, I'm dead.
yeah.
I'm dead."
Because right at the beginning of the book, it says that, the whole court knows that there's no way for the king and queen, like their chambers don't connect. And the whole court knows that they have not traveled to each other's bedchambers.
Yeah.
And then you have Costas finding out that they could go anytime they
As
wanted.
soon as I read that, I was like, "Y'all are really underestimating."
And even that reveal of seeing him in Atolia's bed is after, the assassination attempt when he kisses her on the stairs, and it specifically says this was a kiss between a man and his wife. Like, this was not
Mhm.
like all of a sudden I almost died and now I care
Yeah,
about you. Now I realize I care about you. It
Yeah.
was just a public display of affection.
I love that like, the queens I don't remember what they were called, they're not, like
Attendance.
yeah, they, like, all knew, and, like,
Right. They
Yeah.
all of the
recognize.
guards are just like, "Wait, what?"
What? Well, I think what's interesting about it, right, is like the way this deals with like disability plays into a
Mhm.
lot of that is that
Yeah,
I feel like because Costas only has one hand, most of the men in the court have this assumption that he is like weak and
yeah,
foolish and doesn't know what he's doing because, and so I think it's interesting because that it's like deconstructing that in so many different ways where he is really clever and able to take care of himself and
yeah.
so I like that element.
And
Yeah,
you
but I
see
like that it also he doesn't have this, like it's very realistic in how he feels about it, where he still feels like,
angry.
this is unfair,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm very upset about it," but
Mhm.
he
Right.
also knows how to work with it.
Yeah.
Right. And one, you have over and over and over again in this book, you have it emphasized that people see what they expect to see,
Mhm.
right? If you are putting on an act, they often will buy that act as the whole truth and not as, and even when you, pull the curtain back and do a little reveal, a little peek behind the curtain, as soon as it swings back shut, they're like, oh, that must have been
That wasn't real.
like,
Yeah.
that can't be because my own eyes are
Mhm.
telling me that this is true, and so I'm just gonna believe that.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, you do see one in this book, it is mentioned that his, um immune system and constitution and everything is not the same as it was before he lost his hand, had the fever, was in the prison, for a while. Like, his health is permanently damaged beyond just his physical disability.
Mhm.
He is going to continue to have health issues throughout the series, which I think is a part of, I guess in books in general, especially like romance books, but like they get shot and they are banging immediately, not even with a bandage. They're just like,
We're all
it's
good.
Fine. I'm
alive.
just
Look
bleeding
at
out, it's
you. And
cool.
it's like, what? You literally like have a bullet in your stomach. What are we talking about right
They're like,
now?
"No, no, we put a bandage on it. We took the shirt, we
We're all
wrapped
good.
it, it's fine."
You've never done this before, but you did a great job. Amazing. Um, and then but a lot of times your main character gets injured, and that's like a scary scene, and that's like a big deal, and then they're just fine forever after that. They never have any issues with it. They never have any side effects or complications, and that is not true with Eugenides and his hand and the ordeal of multiple prisons and multiple near life
And the
or death.
mental impact that it's had on him, because it also affects his mental health, like, you can
Mhm.
like, with the nightmares and stuff like that, which I think
Right,
is an underrepresented side of disability
right,
and chronic health issues, is that,
Mhm.
like, mental impact that it can have on you, where it really starts to weigh on you when
right.
things aren't going your way or whatever, and she does a great job of addressing that.
Yeah.
And I liked, because I wasn't here for book 2, how
Mhm.
when the gods at the end are like, "Well, do you want your hand back?" And they're like, "We can't do it anyways." I loved that she didn't even make that a possibility, because
Right.
there's nothing that irritates me more in a fantasy when
Yeah.
Yeah.
disabilities can be cured.
We
Mhm.
cured
by magic.
you with
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it will show up more in the rest of the series, but he's not the only disabled character who's prevalent in the series, and I just really like the whole way that she does it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, let me get back through the comments, and then we will, do the next part, I guess. Okay. I think this is the first long one. Right. Eugenides, yeah, I don't know. But I feel like by this time in the series, like you're ride or die with him. You're just like, you and me.
I love him
Yeah,
so much.
I do too. And I think because Heather warned me, I loved Costas right away too, because I was like, "Oh, sweet summer child, you are being so
Right.
manipulated."
Right.
That was how I felt this time rereading it. I was like, "Oh, this is great."
I'm like, I don't know how yet, but I know he's manipulating you.
Right. Well, you literally open the book with him having punched Eugenides and Eugenides just having a little chat. Like, hey, what are we gonna do with you? It's a
Yep.
mystery. It's a
And the whole
mystery.
sword fighting thing is so funny because he's so annoyed that they're just doing basic sword fighting, and come to find out it's because Jen is trying to help him improve his swordsmanship.
I
Right.
know.
At the
Well,
very
and
end.
it was funny because I was like, what is the purpose? Because you, as the reader, know you're like, his father is
Yeah,
the like
he
head of
knows
the
the
army. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing here?
Yeah.
also, the fact that one Costas is like, I wasted all those weeks fighting with the best swordsman I've ever seen, doing nothing. And then also you find out that Jen has been sparring with the Adesian ambassador, Ornan,
Yeah.
because Ornan is not afraid to hit him with his stick and has actually been, keeping up his exercise and training in
Yeah.
secret with someone who
Yeah.
already knows, and also doesn't love him that much, but is on his side
Mhm.
to where like he's happy to hit him, but also they're safe together.
There were so many like good like little fight scenes where he grabs the wooden sword and they're like, we wouldn't do that with the real sword. He's like, yeah, I would.
Right,
I have.
right, exactly.
Good.
I love Attolia and Jen.
Yeah.
I do. Like this was a series when I first read it. Like I wasn't like my reading was very censored and stuff. I've talked about this a lot, but my parents are very conservative, very strict, and they are like true believers. So it's one, they definitely felt like a lot of things were not age appropriate. But even beyond that, like their media consumption and stuff is very censored. Like they didn't have like a whole separate list of standards or rules for themselves and then a different one for their kids. They just believe this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so that's not in their house at all, which I can respect that. But my reading was very censored. And one thing that like they were like real big on, they didn't want us to be boy crazy. So they like weren't they didn't allow anything like kissing and up, basically.
How
Sexual
ironic that now,
explicitly.
like, all you read is
Surprise! That worked out for them really, really well.
Yeah.
But, so, like, romance, like, really wasn't a thing that we were allowed to read much at all as kids. So for me, like, I
This
didn't even
is
know I
the
liked
same.
romance, honestly, at the time, but at the same time, like, this was, like, one of the most romance things that I'd read, and I was just like, the little brushes and instances and, it meant
For like
it
going to
meant, like,
bat for
everything
him.
to me, like, I love you characters.
Yeah.
Love that.
I think that
Right.
like, they had never seen him as the thief. You have, like, this mystical almost, although maybe I don't even know how, like, super common knowledge the thief's actual political implications and risks were. I don't know how high
I
up in the know you would have to be to really
Yeah.
feel him, but
Because
we
it
know that
sounded
he was
like really
considerate.
it was just like her inner circle. Like it was the I'm gonna forget all their names. The guy that starts with the R that was injured,
Rebellious.
and then her captain of the
Yeah.
guard or whatever. It felt like that was pretty
Yes.
much it that knew about him because everyone else
Mhm.
had opinions.
Yeah.
You know
They
what
just
he
didn't know.
reminds me a little of is, I don't know, have y'all read any Robin Hobb?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, for
Is
anybody in the
this
chat who has, like, Jen in some ways reminds me of the Fool character in the Robin Hobb books, who
Mhm.
also is, like, much more than he seems on the surface and, like, lets
Right.
people make assumptions about who he is, so I think those kinds of characters are so interesting.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen like spoiler videos of people who've read it, and I
Mhm.
can see why. Yeah, because like he's pretty young at the beginning of the series,
Well,
and
or
then
he appears to be.
yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I did a whole video of, mask off characters because this is, like, my favorite type of trope, and a lot of times it is hard to, um, recommend it because half the time it's a spoiler that
Mhm.
someone
Yeah.
is not who they appear to be because you as the reader start the book or start the series
Mhm.
at face value, you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know? So, I really liked doing that video because I was able to be like, "Hey, this falls in the trope.
I'm
Can't
not
tell
telling
you
you.
who, can't tell you
Mhm.
where, can't tell you when, but just
Yeah.
know if this is the thing that you also like in this series, you will get it."
Mhm.
And I actually got a new favorite from the comments of that video because
Oh,
they were
nice.
like, "Hey, you would like the Firebird Chronicles from T.A. White. It has this." And I read it, and I really, really liked it.
I do really like that trope, actually.
It's a
Yeah.
good one, but yeah, it's hard to find recs for because yeah, it's a spoiler, so it's not
Mhm.
like people
Yeah.
are just putting it out there like, "Hey."
Also, like, before I did that video, I literally made it, like, the day that I was like, "You could call this m mask off characters," because I was like, "What do you call this?" Like, "What am I doing?" Like, I have, like, a 5-sentence explanation,
Mhm.
but I don't have a video title.
Yeah. Nice.
So, what was your favorite part of the book? Dun, dun,
I
dun.
thought about this, like, and I was trying to come up with a good answer because I was like, "She's totally gonna ask what her favorite parts were." Um, shoot.
That's true.
I swear I had a good answer last night as I was falling asleep.
The Queen's Guard were chasing Jen, but just as an intruder, not as a
Yeah.
true mastermind,
I don't think
and
they
definitely
really
not
knew who he
politically
was.
savvy, just as someone who's good at breaking into places, nothing more than a cat burglar for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. I guess maybe I really liked the part where he starts sword fighting all the guards.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel
That
like
is
that
a
whole scene
really
was,
good
like,
scene,
very
yeah.
satisfying.
It was.
Yeah. I think there were just so many little things that she did that I really appreciated. Like I said, by making it from Costa's point of view, you really got to see without seeing them fall in love, you kind of got to see their romance almost as a progression because he
Mhm.
saw their romance as a progression, which I
Right,
think is genius, so that you had an established couple that you still
right.
solely fell for because you're seeing it from a third party. I
Mhm.
Yeah.
think the fact that she could do tiny little reveals throughout,
Mhm.
all leading up to a bigger reveal is
Mhm.
so impressive. But I think the last little like scene where Jen is explaining like I did all of this I created this entire situation. I told her within 90 days I was going to do this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and
Was
here's why. And like him sitting there talking to the captain of the guard and just being like, here's what I told the queen I was going to do. And the captain
yeah,
is just like,
right.
I guess so.
And
I guess that's it. We
yeah,
all fell for it.
yeah,
And it was like,
and he's like, I like to have some wiggle room."
yeah, I
Right.
like
Like,
a little
since he
wiggle
did
room
it way
there.
Like,
faster,
give
yeah.
myself a margin. I also, like
I thought it was genius.
you also have small instances throughout the book. You saw it in the Queen of Attolia as well, but the Baron Arondites has been a problem for the Queen her entire rule for decades. He is an enemy of the throne that she cannot actually get rid of. Like, he always stays just on this side of treason. She can't arrest him. She can't like actually do anything against him because he is so powerful. But he has always been kind of not that subtly against her, right? And throughout this book, you see a few different times the guardsmen, they all know whatever is good for Baron Arondites is bad for the queen and vice versa. And you also have a lot of people who are worried about the divide between the king and queen because they know that the Baron will use this as a way to get more power. So even when it's just a couple sentences here and there, you have the groundwork still laid out in this book. The Baron Arondites is a problem. So when he does take everything down, and also it always happens early, it happens earlier in the book than I think it does. I always view that as like the end of the book. The bridge is hilarious.
That was hilarious because all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, that was such like a little like brush off scene where he's just like lounging in his throne and he's like, make him build a bridge.
Right.
And you're like, oh
and
my
like
god.
sweet. There's just like all these things where you think he's like not paying attention, but he is. I love it.
And he's just like throwing these things out there willy-nilly to annoy people, but in reality it's
it's always exactly the thing that he should say. And if he did it any other way, they would have to argue with it. You know, they would have to be like, well, Your Majesty, you don't actually want to offend this baron or whatever. Well, but because he does it like he doesn't know any better, there's like
everyone's just like, okay.
How do we build a bridge here?
I loved how it like flashed to the Queen of Eddis too. And even her court was like, why would he do this? And she's like, here's why. Because he's an evil genius.
And not only does he get this bridge built and keeps all of the queen's allies happy, but the Edesian soldiers are going to volunteer as labor and are going to be, you know, their hosts are going to feel much happier about having to provide for them, basically, because now they are getting tangible, I don't know what word I want, but good things from it.
And I also like that in this series, like because he's like manipulating all these situations, but he always seems to find a way so that like, even if somebody's kind of collateral damage, that he can make something good out of it. Like however you say these names. I read it physically this time. Janus, his brother or whatever, that ended up kind of being collateral damage to the fall of the family, that he was able to like give it a good twist. Because he was like, you're a good person. Let me find a way to make this not.
And that Jen and Dite could have been friends, but they were both in love with the same woman. And they didn't like each other solely because of that. And even at the end, like, they do like each other, but I don't think Jen is too sad that the queen had no idea and or is never going to really be
at the end, like, they're in the room and she's like, that's not true. And then everyone in the room is just staring at her like,
Yeah, I love when Costas is like, it was common knowledge as far as he was aware. Like, everyone knew that he was in love with the queen, except the queen.
Oh, the flipping of the coin. The tiny little ways that the gods interfere with Jen cracks me up. Like with the coin always landing the same way. Him getting drunk on the like parapet. He's so cross about it. He was so mad.
Right. Well, you see he has already accepted that the gods' solution and that his solution and that the way for him to get everything he wants is to be the King of Attolia. But he wants to be the figurehead King of Attolia. He only wants to be the husband of the queen. That's really all he wants. And they keep telling him, you have to actually rule. And he's like, absolutely not.
Like,
Like,
not,
I want to do
not
this
happening.
again.
And then, like, he's complaining when he's drunk because the queen's attendant tells him that story, and he's like, everyone else gets all these, like, big philosophical messages from the gods. Mine's go to bed, Jen.
And I also just think, as someone who has deconstructed from evangelicalism in a lot of ways, reading about a different God, but reading about a devotee of that God talking about how it doesn't matter what risks he takes or how high up he is or what he does, he's in the hand of his God. And eventually the God is going to have to let him fall because he's not immortal, right? The God's not going to keep him immortal. But besides that, up until that point, he's safe no matter what he does. It doesn't matter if he's very careful or if he is, doing things that most people would find to be like horrific risks. He's just as safe either way because his God pays attention to him and has him.
I also like that you see him not always worship, that he also complains, and he's like, I don't always necessarily agree with them. I don't want this necessarily. I have to go along with it because they put me here.
Yeah.
And I want to be with her, but I'm not necessarily happy with them right now. And I'm going to badmouth them a little bit.
Right.
And I like that there's, as much as he's devoted to them and has accepted it, he's also, a little bit sassy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back in the book, I really love that Costas figures out that the dogs and the guards coming and everything are a distraction for the king to be alone. And he's like, oh, please, gods, don't let the little bastard be. He's like cursing him out in his head and talking about how like a toddler could take him out. Like, please don't let him be dead when I get there. Like, let me look dumb. And he gets there and the king is perfectly fine. And he's like so happy. And he's like, this is great. And then the assassins step out immediately. And it's just so great because like you do have that. He's like kind of laying out for you what he thinks is going to happen. And then you get there and you're like, oh, it's completely fine. It's fine. And then it's not. It's exactly that. And also the thing that Jen was the most angry about with the assassins was that he has to go tell the queen that he got hurt and that he's like, I didn't have the garden searched. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And also, like, one of my favorite reveals of the whole series, honestly, is how he complains the entire way and is talking about how he's on death's door and they're all gonna, and he's just tricking them all, even though everything he's saying is accurate.
True.
And you find out that once again, you've already found it out, but even at this stage of his maturity, right? He can handle pain silently. He doesn't have to complain at all, but he does on purpose to make people feel like he's okay.
He's being dramatic. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then everybody assumes that like Costas was really the one who killed the assassins and like the king is forcing him to not take credit for it.
I also love how as he's running to the king, he's still trying to convince himself that he doesn't actually like the king. He's like, no. I don't want to save him because I like him. It's fine.
Right. And I do like how Costas ends up caring about the king for his own sake, not because he's the king, not because he serves him, not because Costas will be punished if he fails in his duties to protect the king. He ends up caring about him, and he doesn't really understand how or why or when he started caring about him. Even like later in the book, even later on, he's like, I ran to save his life, but I didn't know any of what I know now. I didn't know that the queen loved him or that he loved the queen. I didn't even know he was really a good person or a good ruler or any of that. What was
like
it?
Sleeping on a bench. And he's like, why am I sleeping on this bench in this room where everyone's mad at me?
Oh, poor Costas. And also, Costas being so incredibly angry when the king just drops him out of nowhere.
Mhm.
He's just like, "You have upended my entire life, and now I have nothing. Like,
Mhm.
why?" And
So good.
Jenna's like, "Have you noticed a lot of near-death misses lately?" They were not accidental, genius. They were not all coincidences. Just
I love it.
Okay, here we go. I think I like best the section where Costas figured out how strong and in love Chloe and Jenna are. Yes.
Mhm.
I also really love that we end the book with the queen's most loyal servants having loyalty to both of them, and that they were able to kind of come out of this transition of power um with a lot like a great foundation and with stability and without as many casualties as you might usually have in a change of power like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that point,
Yeah.
he doesn't realize that loyalty to one is loyalty to both.
Mhm.
Right.
Every time he would call her Irene too. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but that always got me. It was just like, oh.
Yep.
I think because in a lot of ways, he's the only way that thinks about her like that.
Yeah.
Because she is the queen to everybody
Yeah.
else. She's not a person, really.
And I do think that's an interesting part of the world building, that the rulers are called by the name of their country, right? You have Attolia, Attolis, Attis, and Sunis. That is the ruler, and it's used right at the very beginning, and you see it throughout, and you don't and so you've thought about them that way the entire time, and then, like, it's at least halfway through the Queen of Attolia before you learn the Queen of Attolia's name.
Yeah.
Up until that, she's just Attolia. And the
Yeah.
same thing in a lot of ways with Edis, but the world building is such that you think of the rulers as the rulers. So, it's like the same reveal for the reader almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I think there's a couple, but we'll see when we get there. Right. It is especially I mean, if you have ever been away from home, especially I think as like a college-aged kid, because that is kind of the state that he's at, and also that's a time when a lot of people leave home for the first time. Um, and you are so homesick, being in that exact situation, but being the king of Attolia where you can literally never, ever, ever go home, whether this ends up being everything you ever wanted or is the most miserable mistake of your entire life, and you hate every second of the rest of your life, you literally cannot go home.
Mhm.
Home is done. And he's just seeing him like suffer through that. Oh, it gets me every time. I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't see
The
that. Interesting.
the very end of the book is Talia's talking about how Jen is more than the average ruler,
Mhm.
which is not really, on its own, it's not like a huge spoiler or anything. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, I don't know. I just love watching. I love that these books are so good on their own, but I also really like reading and knowing where we're going and how this person factors in and how
Mhm.
their change in opinion factors in and, just seeing
Yeah.
And you see over and over again, obviously in this book, the Medes are not super prevalent, the Mede Empire. You have them referenced, you have it talked about how when they come back, Attolia needs to be united. You also have the fact that the assassins were provided by the Medes, and you have the spies in the Mede Empire going dark, and you have the Emperor basically telling Attolia that he's coming for her. But they're not a prevalent, or they're not present in this book. They're still far away kind of in this one.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, that's coming.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I like how it like without it being in the book, you don't lose sight that that's kind of what's coming because it's like still referenced just enough so that you don't forget about it.
It's like there is a war coming that we need to be ready for.
We're focusing on the inner workings right now, but don't forget about this thing that's still going to happen.
Right, exactly. And they are really focused on the inner workings. It talks a lot about how even though Attolia is brilliant, just because of the nature of her rule, because she's a woman ruling men, all of these things, she can't unite her barons in a truly meaningful way, and that has to happen before the Medes come again.
Yeah.
And that but by sheer fact, not only is Eugenides brilliant, not only is he the man for the job in so many different ways, but by sheer fact that he is not Attolian, that he has not grown up in this court, that he is not loyal or from any one baron's house or any of those things, puts him in a unique position where he can be friendly or allies with all of them.
Yeah. And that he's smart enough to put people in their place without it being obvious that he did it. Like everyone knows that he did it, but there's no way to really prove that he did. He didn't just like, you know, in the middle of court be like, you're done. Right. It was like all these little things that happened that
dominoes, and then
to
go. Yeah.
I also think that watching Jen in this book is satisfying because in the first book, you have a child for all intents and purposes. He's a young teen. He maybe 15, maybe not. We never get his ages, which I find interesting. But he's obviously not a fully grown man at all. And then in The Queen of Attolia, you see him become a man, not only through the passage of time, but also through losing his hand and just the trauma of that and how much he matures because of the events of The Queen of Attolia. Not only does he lose his hand, but he's literally the reason why his country is at war. So, he matures rapidly in that book. And then in this one, we're seeing the results of that, and he's still so young, but he's the most mature he's ever been, obviously. And we also know that he is sarcastic, that it's the first chapter of The Thief. It talks about how he says he has trouble not responding. He always has a better comeback than your initial dig, right? You might have hurt him, but he's going to hurt you worse with just his words, right? And he has always struggled to not eviscerate you, and that gets him in a lot of trouble, and it also causes a lot of strain on his personal relationships. So in The King of Attolia, obviously he's not doing that, and it's the first time he really cannot tell you exactly what he thinks of you because he needs to practice diplomacy, even if the observers don't realize that he is practicing diplomacy, right? They think he's doing nothing, but it's just interesting to see someone who has a response. It's not that they weren't able to think of anything. He has a response ready and loaded and just choosing not to use it because that would ultimately benefit him best.
The scene with his cousins where he's after he gets sliced open by the assassins killed me.
Yeah.
Because he's like actually like talking back to them, and then they're like still putting him in his place. And Costas is like, wait, are these the cousins that like dunked him?
That's also the only time in the whole book that you see him referred to as Jen.
Mm-hmm.
When his cousin is like, Jen, go to sleep and stuff. Like, that's the only time, because here he's not Jen.
Right. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or all the times that he's in court acting like he's falling asleep, it's really just him like trying to contain everything.
Yep. He's always listening.
Yeah. And I do think it's fun when the Baron and his son are conspiring and Eugenides is up in the rafters up above them, because that's what his grandfather literally designed the palace for, but called the conspiracy room. He's just there listening. Also, I do want to mention, the Baron is trying to hook him up with a mistress, right? Specifically a mistress that he thinks is going to handle him.
Right.
And Eugenides keeps dancing with her younger sister, and her younger sister sees Eugenides as more than a fool, right? Not that she has like designs on him or romantically or anything like that, but just supports him.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I don't understand why you think I'm worth getting a beating for and stuff. And she's like, because I can see. You're not the people who are actually trying to pay attention.
Like, little do they know, Jen is totally in love with his wife, the queen, and not interested.
Right. Yeah. Right. Even there is no temptation that you could give. But
I messaged Heather right after one of the first scenes where Jen and Attolia dance, and he takes out all of her hairpins one by one. And I was just like, I'm going to love this book.
Right. It's so good.
She just like picks them all up and leaves.
Right. I love that scene so much. I can't even begin to tell you. Oh my. What a great book. All right. Is there anything else in particular you guys really wanted to get to in this one? Yeah, that's a good point, Cynthia.
Probably, yeah.
It also is severely underestimated.
Yeah.
Especially because you get the impression that her family is involved with the Baron. So there's probably a lot of manipulation going on. And so she's used to seeing it.
And you also get that her family doesn't really value her. She's not the seductive, gorgeous older sister who,
she's just the smart one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
I can't remember. I don't know if anyone else who has read the whole series. I was wondering in this book, I couldn't remember if she shows up again or not.
I think she does. I don't remember, but I feel like she does. Yeah.
Okay. Same. I kind of feel like she does, but couldn't tell you if that's
I can't remember like the details, but I'm pretty sure she shows up again and maybe like falls in love with someone.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't don't quote me on it, but I think that happened.
Well, if we're both kind of thinking that she's around, she probably is.
I do like that you have this like little mystery of the Prince of Sooness, where it's like everyone's like, is he dead? He disappeared?
Right.
Where is he?
Yeah.
So that is like, I do like that she has like those little things that like leave you for like the next book, but there's no like cliffhangers or anything. So it still reads as a standalone, but like, you know that there's like more
things. Yeah. And then I want to say, don't we end up following for a bit the perspective of the guy who's getting like exiled? I think we do. I think we end up following his perspective in exile as well, and that ends up becoming important, which is interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. I can't remember. I know the next book. This is not accurate. This is a good guess. But this is not accurate. Both of these things kind of end up happening completely separately in different books in different situations, but that's not what actually happens.
That's funny.
Jen did want Costas to improve his mead, and that does come into play, but not for Sophus. For someone who you have met, but I don't think that you would expect to be a really big part of the series. So that's fun. The next book we do get Sophus. And it's kind of my least favorite book. It's fine. It's good. But it's like friends to lovers. I'm like, I don't care about you. You guys are obviously gonna be fine and happy. Let's move on. No, it's still really good. It's just the King of Attolia is my favorite, and then we go over into Sophus, and I'm like, whatever. I guess we're here.
Whatever.
I think the first time I read the series, my two favorites were Queen of Attolia and then Return of the Thief.
Yeah.
So
Return of the Thief is spectacular. It's just I had read the rest of the series many times before the Return of the Thief was ever published. It's like, yes, that's a great finale for the series, and it ends really well, and it's not a disappointment at all. But at the same time, like my original love, it didn't exist. It wasn't.
That makes sense. Whereas, like, I was reading the series like a couple years before that book came out, so it was so it kind of worked. Yeah, but yeah,
right. And it is like a great finale, which is one of the really nice things to be able to recommend a series.
I still need to read the short story collection that she put out too.
Right. I haven't read it either, mostly because I don't love short stories where we're already at the end of the story and then we're just going back in little pockets in time and reading little pieces. I much prefer if I got the short stories in chronological order. So I never read book 3, but I'm reading the short story, before book 3. That I like. I don't mind that at all, but I'm not super interested in.
I wonder if anybody has done that, like broken it up for like what you read where in the series.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
I did know this in this one. I don't know if yours has it, Bethany, but I think there's a short story in the back of this one.
Oh yeah, that's what someone said. Some of the new ebooks have them at the end. The library definitely did not have it at the end.
Yeah, I think some of the short stories at the very least were one shot at the end. And there's also a map in this one. I know some people were very confused. So here you go. Yeah. If you want to screenshot that or whatever. There's a not great version of the map. You're welcome.
I don't know. This has like a character list and an Oh, no, it does have a short story.
Yeah, after that.
Wine shop.
So I think some of because the covers got changed and everything like that. Like that happened with book 5. So I think with the republications of things, I think some of the short stories that
ended up in there.
I want to say, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe these are the same short stories that appear in the collection, but some of them are interspersed. I don't know that all of them are.
I might try to read it because also it's so pretty and it's illustrated.
Yes.
Oh, is that? That's cool.
Like, yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I may try to read that.
I had the original paperback. I borrowed all these from my family, so I don't know where it went, which kind of sucks because for me, I loved the original covers so much more. But
see, I really like these covers.
I like the new ones. I do think that the old ones at least depicted a lot of like what was in the books, which I did appreciate. But I do aesthetically prefer the new ones. They're a lot cleaner.
Yeah, they are.
But at least the original ones weren't just like a generic girl on the cover.
Carrie's saying that the stories from these books are in Moira's pen. So
thank you.
Yeah, I might grab that and like start reading some of those too. That might
yeah, if I'm gonna read a short story that like continues a story, I want it like in between. If I'm gonna read it afterwards, I want it to be more. I want more story then.
Me too. But
Oh,
anything else for this one?
I don't know.
I think so. I already got the next one. I've been doing both the audiobook and the ebook so that when I can't listen to the audiobook, I can just read on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. Someone said the new covers show vignettes from the book. I really didn't look at that.
Oh wow. I've never looked that closely.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's like sword fighting and the queen in the garden and like are those
Oh.
there's
I assume
animals?
those
Are
are
those supposed to be the
things like
dogs
that.
maybe?
Yeah, I think they're supposed to be the war dogs, which again, the brilliance of that with him being frightened of them because the dogs are tore into him before the guards ever got him in the Queen of Attolia. You know, he was hunted by both.
Mhm.
Oh, does this one have 10 gold cups? I don't think mine does.
Maybe the original does the original one?
Don't know. I
Oh,
don't
the
think
new
so.
ebook?
The original one is the king sitting in a throne and then the queen having her hand on his shoulder.
But
Is
are
like
there like cups? Oh, on the new ebooks. It says the new ebook covers has
okay.
10 gold cups on it.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
I love the little covers too. I think because I think my love for the covers is one, I love the queen's dress on the Queen of
Oh, on
Attolia.
yeah.
Like she has this green dress. You're all welcome to my pajama pants that I'm wearing with this, but you have her dress, and obviously you have the hook, which when I read it, at least as a kid, like I didn't pick up on that being like a sign.
Mhm.
Until half of that, I was like, oh my God. But then again, like me and my little romance starved brain, when I picked up book 3 and it was, you know, him sitting there with her hand on his shoulder, I was like, oh, this is
I also
so
like all the little details. Like if you look at it, like he has the scars on his hand and like all of that. Like,
right.
they did do a really good job on those original covers of making it
Yeah.
actually part of the story instead of just a generic person.
It's
'Cause I feel
interesting
like
though,
that
because
used
like I don't know that I ever would have picked up the original books based on the original covers
me
because
neither.
they look like historical fiction.
That's
Yeah.
when I first saw
Yeah.
the like original Queen's Thief cover, like the first book with
Mhm.
like the pendant or whatever, which again has meaning to the story. But yeah, I
Mhm.
thought it was like historical fiction.
It looks like historical fiction, so I wouldn't have picked. So that's one thing I do like about the new covers is they look like fantasy books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the vibe is fantasy.
Yeah. Although we were talking about this, I think, in the very first live show, because again, Jess was like expecting magic and stuff. You don't really get, I guess it's just the current trend, or maybe it's because I don't read enough fantasy
Mhm.
these days outside of it, but it seems like all fantasy books right now have magic. Like you almost don't have like you just don't have a lot that don't have any sort of magic system or
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean
definitely.
there are books that are low magic, like the first Law books by Joe Abercrombie. There
Mhm.
is magic, but it like plays a very
Minimal.
pretty minor
But
role.
even those are or at least started are older, right? Like, the first book was published a while ago, right?
Yeah, I mean like I don't well, I mean maybe
I
like
mean, I don't
20.
know, I haven't read them, so I'm
Yeah.
just
Even
assuming.
like the Bear and the Nightingale series, which doesn't have a ton of magic, the gods are very prevalent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily magic based, but you have magical beings that
Right.
manipulate things.
I think a lot of the stuff that's more drawing on mythology is like that now,
Yeah.
where it's like the magic is just like supernatural beings more than an actual
Right.
magic system. Um, but I have read some low magic books,
Right.
but it is something that I see people sometimes criticize because sometimes they are expecting more
Yeah.
magic.
This isn't fantasy because, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not an absolute rule, it's just a trend, right? That
Mhm.
most fantasy books
Yeah. I mean,
currently.
and these have some magic with the
Yeah.
gods, which, to
Right.
me is enough, like, that's fine,
Yeah.
but
but I think in a lot of ways people expect the main character to have some sort of power, you know, and in some ways he has the blessing of the gods to do things that regular men would not. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's just not the same as, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna fall off of this roof
Project
because the gods are
What?
gonna save me, but
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think these covers give magic though.
No.
You know, like
no,
it's
they give more like war political
yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, which I'm fine with.
Yeah.
You know what I think is like kind of a mix of the two that has more magic but has like a character is have y'all read like Six of Crows? Because I feel like Kaz Brecker
Mhm.
is also kind
Very,
of a similar character.
Have you read The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick?
Yeah, I read the first one and I
Okay.
liked that
I
one.
think that whole series is very similar to Six of Crows and The Queen's Thief. I
I
think
can
it uses
I can see that. It's a little like denser and stuff, but yeah.
right, it's much more it's fully adult
Mhm.
and it's written fully adult, like,
Yeah.
you have to have the bandwidth to
Mhm.
be able to read that book. You can't just be like,
casually.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that's
it's
not one
not
you can like casually pick up. But yeah, no, I see that.
yeah,
I
and I
don't know.
think it gets even more so as, that trilogy progresses some, but
Interesting.
I definitely think that it's, like, almost like the adult version of those different.
That series has been like on my radar since you read it. I just don't have the
You
ability to
got, like,
read a
10
high
years
fantasy.
before you're gonna have the bandwidth to read it, so just know that. Don't try.
Like I can barely. It's taken me. I'm reading Church Girl, which is like I think I'm on day like 9 reading this. It's like
Yeah,
barely 300
I
pages,
mean,
not even.
you have a newborn. I
Yeah.
right.
fine.
My sister has a 4 and a 2-year-old, and she's counting down the years till she has the bandwidth to pick up Mask of Mirrors. She doesn't even feel like she has the bandwidth for this, not because she couldn't, but because she's like, if I pick these up, I'm gonna wanna sit and read it cover to cover, and I'm gonna be annoyed that I
Yeah,
Yeah.
cannot.
that's fair.
I was like reading on my phone because I was like, I don't want to stop reading, but I need to like walk around with you. So I'm just like
Mhm.
reading on my phone while
Mhm. Yep.
I feel like I don't know, with my first kid, I don't think I read anything for like 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't read. I could have. I was not yet reading ebooks, but my first one, unfortunately, I'm sure Robin, you could relate to this. He I nursed him, right? But also like he did not sleep if he was not latched on. So
Seriously.
I held him for like it was mistakes were made, many mistakes were made, but um when we had him, there was a whole lot going on. My husband was not officially laid off, but was kind of laid off, and we were living with my parents, and so it was very difficult for me as a first-time mom to put the baby down and let him cry at all, because then someone else would come in and get him, and then after, like, 5 minutes, hand him back to me. I'm like, "Okay, well, thank you for nothing." Absolutely nothing. But I also had, like, postpartum depression and didn't realize it and stuff, so needless to say, like, I held him all the time. Um, and so I was on, like, Pinterest a lot, that was my thing at the time, I was like, "Pinterest, the new thing." I was on Pinterest all the time, but, like, if I had had ebooks on my phone, best believe that's what I would have been doing while I was stuck holding him for a whole month.
I watched a lot of TV. Like, I had never before I had my first kid, I had never watched, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I watched all of Buffy and Angel in the
Mhm.
first several months after having my first kid, because
Yeah.
I was also, like, pumping exclusively. So I was up all the time. So I would just, like, watch on my
Mhm.
laptop while holding the
Yeah.
baby or
No,
pumping. It's like
no.
Yeah, I pretty much just read on my phone. Like I've never been like a phone reader. I would get so mad when Libby wouldn't let me send to my Kindle,
mhm.
but I pretty much just always read on my phone.
Yeah. I read a lot after my third baby, not the first 3-4 months, but probably right after that. I read, or maybe even not the first couple months, but that's the baby that I read like multiple books a day with my postpartum depression and didn't deal with it, just read another book.
Just gonna pretend this isn't a thing.
Yeah, I definitely just binge
I was
watched these shows.
that was one where it was like I knew I had a problem, and like my sister and my husband were like trying to be like, you have a problem. And but I felt like if I wasn't reading, then I was just gonna be miserable. I didn't feel like I was going to like get help or like get better. I was just like, well, yeah, I'm reading a lot, but I would rather read than be in life. So deal with it.
This is what we're doing.
That did
Yeah.
eventually end. But if you feel it that way, you should probably seek help. Just so
I
you
probably should have done that. Yeah, with my second kid, it was Gossip Girl and Gilmore Girls. I watched all of it.
You need something.
Yeah.
You're busy, you're exhausted, but like your brain has a lot of consuming ability,
Yeah.
not a whole lot of like
Not a lot of
creative ability.
processing ability,
Yeah.
but like consuming, yes.
If we can
And
just
that's why I'm like, I have to read. Like, I can't read. Like, this is as close to fantasy as I can do right now. It
Right.
has to be like easy peasy
Right.
reads, because otherwise my brain's like, I'm sorry, what is happening?
Yeah, exactly. And
got
then
into a lot of, like,
4 hours, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, no. I got into a lot of like YA fantasy stuff, honestly, with when I had babies too. So
Yeah.
like we're a little older, or just other YA stuff. Like I read like like Cinder and the rest of that Marissa
Oh,
Meyer
yeah.
series, and I read a lot of like Sarah J. Maas. Like I don't know, it's just
Anything that's just
what I was
brain
doing
candy.
too.
yeah.
That's what I was doing too.
Mhm.
I have 8 Thanksgiving romance novellas just waiting for me. That's
Amazing.
You got this.
It's
And that
great.
is something just kind of understated with this series is it is so brilliant, it is so interconnected, but it's literally all the author being smart. You don't have to like use a lot of brain power to
no.
process it.
No, it's true. She kind of like lays it out for you.
Yeah.
It's very
But again, I
impressive.
think because it's for teenagers, it's like
Mhm.
written for teenagers. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Really the only thing you have to remember, like think about, is who the characters are and remember their names, and everything else is really
Yeah. I also feel like younger teens could definitely read these. Like, I feel like you could almost do like older middle grade.
that's
was
where
like
I feel like it is too. I feel like a 12, 13-year-old would
Mhm.
easily like fall
I
in
was
love with
like
it.
13 and I read it because my sister said
Yeah.
to, and she was 2 years younger than me, so she would have been like 11.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of my
shared-
oldest is like almost 11, and I feel like he might be into this.
Yeah.
I mean, we were reading far above our grade level. That is true. And we were readers. We read for fun all the time on our own. So that does play
Yeah.
a part, but at the same time, that is the age.
Yeah.
that we
Yeah, I
love.
feel like if you had like a 10, 11-year-old that was like really into reading, this could be something.
Right.
Because they're not crazy long. So it's not like, oh, I'm holding this like giant book or whatever.
Well, and he reads like big middle grade fantasy books.
Oh my God, some of those middle grades are so chunky. I'm just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
The Thief, again, when it starts, you are following a young teen boy.
Yeah.
That is your whole first book.
Yeah.
So obviously with him losing his hand and everything, you have some stuff that, just depends on the kid, but
Like
overall,
nothing is, I don't think anything in here is like gratuitous. You know what I mean? Like you don't like see anybody like being,
she is not
tortured in
writing.
detail.
Yeah, she's not writing trauma porn or for the she's not writing to get a reaction out of you or
and the romance is also very low key. It's like
like Heather said, it's a lot of like brushing of the hands.
Right. And it's also one, like I said, part of why I originally loved it was for the romance, but I also feel like it is a series where if you're not really looking for it to have any romance in your books, it's still a low enough level that it's almost like it's there if you want it, and
There,
also if
but
you don't
it's
want
not,
it, it's
yeah.
not there that much.
Yeah, you can ignore it if you're not interested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I do think it's one of those books that can easily, like, if you have both boys and girls, both could love it because
Absolutely.
of the different elements in there. It doesn't lean too heavy on like either romance or too much on the war side or whatever. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
no matter really where your kid falls on that, like, you
Yeah.
know, enjoyment of like
Yeah.
what is in my book, it really
Like,
hits all of the
exactly.
different beats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the few series, honestly, the few YA series that follows a teen boy. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, it doesn't follow a teen boy through the whole series necessarily.
Right. But
You
that's a
have
good one.
younger boys in 2 more of the books,
Mhm.
and obviously the very beginning, so it's a rare
Yeah.
find.
Especially in fantasy.
Yeah.
And that the boy isn't like, I don't know, like really alpha male and
Right.
violent, and
Yeah.
he uses his brain, not his brawn, which I think is
Mhm.
something that you don't often get to see in a male lead character in this type
Yeah.
of genre.
Absolutely.
And Cynthia said this. Yeah. It's kind of like, Percy Jackson in that your boy main character is not, like, the most athletic, the biggest, the strongest,
Mhm.
and that's good too.
Yeah, I like that.
And yes, if you get the old ebook on Libby, depending on which library you use, it won't send to Kindle. If you get the new version, you can read it on Kindle. It's just the old one isn't in the EPUB format. So I just can't send it to my Kindle because I'll never read it if it gets into my Kindle.
Here we are. Well, thank you both for talking to me about this book. I was very
Yeah, this was fun.
excited and happy. The next one is in the middle of December, which I think we already know Bethany won't be able to attend, so it might just be
One of
me.
one of my
We'll see.
kids' birthday parties is that day, so
I'll be here.
We'll see if Robin shows up or not. She's at the mercy of her child, so we'll find out.
Most likely I will be. So
Hopefully. If not, I will quickly talk about my least favorite book and we will be done. But no. Yeah.
it's
This
the
is
14th, Carrie. December 14th. I just looked at my calendar.
It's a Saturday, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to have it in like the teens for every single month, but also December was like, let's stay as far away from Christmas as we can while still not being the first week.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This is my favorite book, so I was very happy to talk to you all about it. So thank you.
Yeah, it was fun.
I was very nervous going in knowing it was your favorite. I was like, what if I don't love
it? You're like,
I'm gonna be the downer in life.
5 stars across the board so far. I'm not too sure about this. But yeah, I'm glad. I feel like you got to the point, unlike Jessica. It's fine, Jessica. You're not watching, but it's fine, Jessica. You got to the point where you're like, all right, I see.
I see what we're doing now.
So much.
Yeah.
Which is hard to kind of recommend in that way because it's like, yeah, I know you were like the beginning is goodish, but listen, it gets better.
Yeah. Give it a minute.
But it really does. So, everyone who is here, basically, you made it to the 3rd book, you know what's up.
Yep.
It was good, but thank you, everyone, and I will see you next month.